So this part, I'm using this part to transit you from EMath chord job to amath chord job. So whatever you learn in EMath chord job is still necessary in amath chord job, and it's still necessary as you move on to amath circles and also amath linear log. So they are under the same family, the coordinate geometry family. So whatever that you learn in EMath is still applicable in amath. So let's do a quick run through first. So the length formula that you learn in EMath is still applicable. The gradient formula will always be used. Okay, maybe then a bit slightly new one will be the one on midpoint. So we don't see midpoint formula in EMath. So the midpoint formulas help you to calculate the coordinates that cut a length exactly into half. So if you look at the formula, okay, can you see the x coordinate? You are sharing the x coordinate. So something like x1, y1, x2, y2. So you are going to locate the point that cuts it into half. So typically we call it the midpoint. So we cut it into half by sharing the x coordinate. So what do we mean by share? That means you add the two coordinates and then you divide by 2. So we also share the y coordinate and then you divide by 2. So it will cut a length into half. So one of the things that we will need, we will use midpoint quite often. So we will use midpoint in perpendicular bisector. Later on, you will see that. We will use midpoint when we have like shapes for parallelogram, rectangle, rhombus, square, all this. So the midpoint formula will help you to find certain coordinates. So that's one of the things that you need to know. Okay, moving on, you also learn about x coordinate and y. You learn about x-intercept and y-intercept. So that is still applicable. That is still applicable. Okay, and it's very much in use. And then same gradient, we always, collinearity always means same gradient. We also use this a lot in amath because you will come into shapes like parallelogram, where you got same gradient. Okay, like square, rectangle, all these, we got length that are same gradient. And from straight line, always remember gradient come from mx plus c. So in an equation, right, if let's say you got the equation but you don't know the gradient, always remember to make y the subject. So this part is the gradient. So do remember this. So you also need it in amath. Okay, and a point passing through a line. So if you got the equation and they give you a coordinates, okay, feel free to substitute the coordinates. So we also use this in EMath, we also use this in amath. So one of the more critical one will be the intersection of two lines. So intersections of two lines here. In amath, there can be two situations. The first situation is where you got two straight lines intersecting. So you got two straight lines intersecting. So a lot of time it will happen. So they meet at this point. So they kind of like meet each other. So if you want to find the point where they meet each other, you got to do a simultaneous. Okay, another case that happened will be where you get two intersection point. You will be getting a curve and a straight line. So when there is a curve and straight line, obviously you will get two coordinates. So if you do the simultaneous, right, you will get two sets of coordinates. You will get two sets of x and you will get 2 sets of y. The 2 sets of answer will represent the 2 intersecting points. Okay, so this one will be done. You will use this quite a bit in the amath circles, because in the coord job part, most probably you are going to deal with straight line. So you'll be case 1 most of the time. Okay, and in amath, we learn how to find equation. So the 2 cases of finding equation, I will not be working it out, but this is what you have learned in your amath. So to find equation, the ingredient is always a gradient and a point. So you will always need a gradient and a point. So in this case, you'll be getting something like 3x plus c, and then you put in the point. Putting in the point will help you to find the y-intercept. So if you don't have the point, you don't have the gradient, you just have 2 points, well, you go and use a gradient formula first. Okay, so you use it's very much like what you did in your amath. So you get a gradient, you choose the point that you would like to find C. So do the same thing. So in this case, I'm choosing this to find C. So you can use the other coordinate. It's just that I don't like to use negative coordinate. So the same thing will still happen in your amath. Whenever you are supposed to find the equation of a straight line, you got to ask yourself, will you have gradient? Will you be able to find gradient? Okay, or will you have some properties that help you to come up with the gradient? Okay, so that brings us to the gradient part. So in your amath, right, we always have parallel line. So the parallel line is what happens most of the time in amath. So when the lines are parallel, okay, the gradient will be the same. But in amath, you're going to encounter perpendicular lines. You're going to encounter perpendicular gradient. So when something perpendicular happens, when you see a 90 degree, you will learn to apply this formula. You got to learn to apply this formula. So when 2 lines are perpendicular, it's obviously their gradient will not be the same. Okay, so if you look at M1 and M2, one line is going up, one line is coming down. So it doesn't make sense that they are the same. So of course they are not the same. Okay, so they are not the same. And so they follow the formula. Their multiplication of the gradient will be equal to -1. Okay, so later on there will be some examples to illustrate. And in this topic, right, one of the key basic thing will be to get the equation of a perpendicular bisector. So there are 2 features of the perpendicular bisector that you need to know. It cuts at the midpoint. Because it cuts at the midpoint, so we will be using the midpoint formula. And because it's going to cut nicely at 90 degrees, we will be using the formula for perpendicular gradient. So that will be the brand new thing that you will need to start off with perpendicular bisector for amath coord job. So this perpendicular bisector will be also very important in amath circle. There's some property that involve perpendicular bisector in amath circles. So this will be the basic introduction first.